warm? Okay. Well, that's not just me.
If I'm warm, then
Right. Oh, thank you.
Did you get in?
who's Zachary Hagar?
Just use other user. Go down to other, yeah.
Is he a
Huh?
is he our tech guy?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I had Denise
Oh.
Brown on mine.
Probably shouldn't have said that out loud.
I'm welcome, but then nothing happened.
This come from?
From Paul.
It's yours. Mine's not doing anything.
Oh, I know. I'm just,
Zachary?
Just says welcome,
maybe that's all mine.
but it's not welcome.
Sorry.
No, it's preparing Windows.
Which of these?
Ah, there it is.
I don't know how to
Do
give
you
her.
put your
I don't
email
know.
address in first?
Do anything.
I just put in
Test.
Okay, so
my last name and then my first two,
Okay. I cannot
and then at SD25. We haven't used it in forever.
Test.
That page. There's no closing on it.
I can't get any.
are your bookmarks still saved?
Pardon?
Are your bookmarks still saved? Because you usually have your saved bookmarks.
I don't see it either.
It says it's asking me to sign into Chrome. Do I use my district? Do I use my district sign?
Yes.
I always forget where we go.
Did you go to Chrome?
Yeah, I did.
The
And
board
it's
doc.
asking me to sign in.
Mine is still loading.
The district sign in?
Should we just go ahead and start? It didn't come up. But we're not.
I apologize.
Okay. Okay, I call this meeting to order and would welcome everyone who is joining us in person and also those joining us by live stream. Thank you for being here. All of our members are present, and we apologize for the delay. We're having a little technical difficulties. The purpose of the workshop is to receive operational reports from our administration, we will begin with our school safety and security discussion with our local law enforcement. So whoever's in charge.
I'm going to pick it up, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, if
We'll
I
turn it over to
could.
the superintendent.
So, first of all, the introductions to our distinguished guests today. As you can see, we're very well cared for by our local law enforcement teams. And so I would like to introduce Sheriff Manu with the county. And with him today is also Chief Deputy Hamilton and Captain Iverson. And then from Chubbuck Police Department, Chief Giberson and Lieutenant Steve Young? Yep, present. All right, and from Pocatello Police Department, Chief Shy and Lieutenant Dillon. Lieutenant, Captain? Lieutenant. Okay, I was going by the bar. I was hoping I had that right. And so they will be joining us just a little bit later for the discussion. We were able to meet with local law enforcement leaders last week to prepare for this discussion with the board today in regard to safety and security. And I know as we were talking last May and even into early summer that I said, give us a little bit of an opportunity to process what we're doing and maybe next steps. And because there are a number of questions, certainly as we look across the state, a variety of approaches as to what security looks like. And so that's why I'm going with the authorities on the subject. And so I think they'll be very helpful today in assisting the board with any questions that you may have. To begin though, I've asked Courtney Fisher and Tanya Wilkes to come up and just talk to you about what we're already doing, kind of our next steps, and then those partnerships with our law enforcement leaders that are here today. And then I'll wrap up this part of the discussion, and then I'm going to ask if any of the officers have some comments that they would like to share with you as a follow-up, and then certainly any questions that you have, we'll do our best to answer those as a team. Okay?
Okay.
All right. So Courtney, Tanya, please.
All right, I'd like to start. Courtney and I oversee the safety committee. We meet once a month with Chubbuck and Pocatello Police, along with other school district and maintenance, business, and directors of secondary ed and elementary ed. And anyway, when we go over these meetings, we take them very seriously. It's close to our heart, especially in lieu of what happened this last May. And so when we met, we talked about, how this is a layered approach. Working with our law enforcement partners, we identified three, distinct categories that we want to focus on, and that's training, equipment, and leadership.
Okay, so if you were at the back to school kickoff, part of our skit was back to the basics. And so we've been going out and doing road shows at all of the schools. We have hit several of them so far, from elementary to middle school. We will hit the high schools the first week in October. And that's really just to review our protocols that we have in place. That safe schools, which we deemed several years ago, safe schools all day, every day, and those protocols that we currently have in place. So just quickly for you, we'll go over some of those. We have our district badges, and on those badges this year, we added this card. So the front of the badge has the name and the school identification, and also these badges that have the second drill on the back. And then on the front of that card is what's called the Idaho Standard Command Response for Schools language. We want to make sure that we're using universal language from our first responders and law enforcement partners to our dispatch, to what the verbiage that's being used in the schools, to our media, to our parents. So when our parents hear hall check, they know exactly what's happening in the school. So when they hear reverse evacuation, they know what's going on in those drills. Same thing with evacuation and same thing with lockdown.
And so, we started off with going back. I think we have to keep going back and forth. Going back to the basics, that, we talked a lot about what are we doing that we just kind of relaxed on a little bit. So we need to get back to being very diligent with these. And that is keeping all exterior doors locked at all times and using that doorbell system that we have and making sure that we show the badge every single time, your ID, and then wearing badges every day, and making sure that those are visible. even to the students. So I, would have students come up and tell me if they saw an adult in the building that didn't have a badge on. And then we have SROs in the secondary setting. So currently we have a school resource officer at each of the high schools, and then one that we share between Irving and Franklin, and one we share between Alameda and Hawthorne. And we're hoping those will increase as the year go on with increasing SROs. We have a DARE officer that oversees all the elementaries and produces DARE classes. And then we have Officer Daniels that oversees all the SROs, and so he's always on call as well.
And Tanya just mentioned this, but we have that secured entry, and so we want to make sure that we are going back to that and making sure that even though it's a minor inconvenience, we have several individuals, parents, volunteers in our schools that show up every day. We know who they are, but we want to make sure that we're being consistent with that video doorbell system and just encouraging. We have communicated to our schools, when parents know the why, when community members know the why, it's a really easy thing to just say, I show my Costco card at Costco every time I walk in the door. They recognize me, they know I'm a member, but it's just something that you do. And so we've just been trying to encourage our school secretaries and our schools to really get back to that doorbell that's in, checking IDs every time a new visitor enters our buildings. We know our schools are safer when we know exactly who is in our school and the purpose for them being there.
And we do drills throughout the year. We do a fire drill each month, and then we do some hall check drills, some evacuation of campus drills, and then we do lockdown drills. Lockdown drills are pretty traumatic for students at times, but they're important. If, we had to say that we do lockdown drills frequently because we want to get really good at that, and that's hard, balancing, peacefulness and being secure. So we talked a lot about, back in the day when I was at the high school, Pocatello High School, we actually practiced throwing things and barricading the doors. And what they found is, we went to a conference, Officer Vianna and I, that there has been no school shooting where somebody has actually shot through a door. So your locked door is another layer that just keeps us safe. So the urgency to get that door locked and be quiet and be in a safe place in the classroom is pretty important. And we don't have people outside the classroom doors timing them to see how fast they are. So they came up with this script, and that's on the back. It's not a catch-a script. It is literally, this is what we're going to do, and our why is that we are efficient. So the administrator will say, we might have a lockdown drill on Friday, but they might not indicate when. When they start reading this script over the intercom, when they're done reading it, it will be 21 seconds. In that 21 seconds, we want everybody to have the light or doors locked, kids in a safe place, and quiet. That's it. If you have time to turn off the lights, put something over the windows, anything, that's totally, completely individual basis. Then they'll wait about 2 minutes, then they'll get on and say thank you for participating. We just now completed a drill. You can self-evaluate how you did. How did I do, getting my door locked if it's not already locked, getting my kids in a safe place and they're quiet. If I didn't do so well, then that's dialogue. What do I need to do to make sure that I'm doing really good at getting those three things done? If I'm doing really well, that's awesome. I can add to it. Then in January, we're going to get down to 12 seconds. Then by April, which is our highest incident month, we're going to get down to 7 seconds. That's our goal. And so then the whole drill lasts 3 minutes completely total, and it doesn't take a lot away from the day, but it really expresses the urgency to the teacher, especially how well we're doing. And then they send in a form that says yes or no, how well I did, and they'll share that at the staff meeting. And then as a staff, we'll have a dialogue. Man, how well did we do as a team? What about Johnny who's in the bathroom? Did we talk to kids about what to do? And then certain incidents in certain schools is so unique, that's where those dialogues can happen. And so then we start to just become more and more comfortable with just that urgency piece without terrifying.
And then we also have our ongoing training, and that is led by our SROs, and it's called the CRAZE training. That stands for Civilian Response to Active Shooter Events. These trainings, I took this training when I first came on to the school district several years ago, and it provides strategies, guidance, and improvement plan for surviving a critical event. And so we will continue those trainings led by our school resource officers.
And we went to a conference this summer on threat assessments, and we have students that caused some concerns, and we want to do the due diligence to get behind the whys and what's going on, and put support systems in place and interventions in place right away. So the threat assessment team consists of children's mental health, probation, SRO, administrators, and myself, and we're creating a form, and we're almost complete, for administrators to fill out if they have questions about a student, and then reach out to us as a team, and we'll go to those schools, and we'll talk about individually those students, and talk about the interventions and safety procedures that we can put in place right away.
We'll talk about the assessment center.
You bet, and Deanne can help with this one too. The assessment center is hopefully gonna be a huge impact to our community. We're on the beginning stages, we got the grant, so probation is leading that currently at this time, but we're all partners in it. So basically, we've been doing a lot of incredibly remarkable things with partners with children's mental health, the counseling institutes in town, and probation, SRO, the courts. This is just a facility that's gonna house all of it together, so it's a one-stop shop. So when kids go there, they get the assessments they need, they get the utilities and interventions they need, and so we can, instead of reaching out individually, we have a place that we can go to that we can all work functionality together. So it's pretty cool that we're already doing it, we're adding to it, the component of having a facility that has it all.
Where is that gonna be?
It's over by the courthouse. It used to be the adult, I don't know the address. The adult probation used to be there. Do you know?
I think it's 745 Lander.
There you go.
Hmm.
But it's very near the juvenile detention, the YDC and so
Mhm.
forth too as well. We don't really want it to be connected necessarily to, law enforcement. This is supposed to be an intervention,
Mhm.
but the facilities was a great opportunity. So that's where they're going.
So as we continue to monitor and evaluate what we're doing, we identify the things we're doing well. We just shared several of those things with you. In addition, what's really working well is our unified response. We have, as you can see here behind us, tremendous response from our law enforcement and agency partners and emergency services. So that response time, part of the situation that we've seen in other communities is a lag in response time, and I can confidently say that will not happen here. We've had really direct conversations with our law enforcement. We've had other situations arise where we have had just quick, immediate response, and so we are confident, and that always gives me peace of mind, knowing that we have that responsiveness from our partners, and they are true partners in everything that we do. On scene within minutes, and then they're trained and authorized to enter the buildings and assess the situation to take immediate action.
And our relationship with law enforcement is, amazing. Not only do we have the school resource officers in our buildings, and we have, continuous support at our functions and sports events and things like that, we have a teacher house of the JDC program, we have a teacher house of the YDC program, we have a representative that goes to all the court hearings so that we can, and if the judge asks questions about the school and how they're doing in school, we have somebody that can communicate, and that we're just a partner always. And I truly believe it takes a community to help with some of these students and so forth, and so that's what we really represent.
So as we continue these conversations with our law enforcement partners, one of the strongest language to me as we did our follow-up last week was that adding layers. We know what's working well, we know what we're doing, we're reinforcing those protocols in our schools. What additional layers can we add to further enhance our efforts? Some of those, and we just continually are continuing to evaluate, monitor, and seek additional ways to enhance that security. One thing that we're doing in process right now is evaluating our surveillance system and adding additional wiring so that we can add additional surveillance cameras in the schools and alleviate some of those. We know we have some blind spots, and so we're working very actively to alleviate some of those things right now.
And then Officer Shai could speak to this in more depth as well, as, they're trying to complete and hopefully get sponsored a grant to increase the SROs in our schools as well. Hopefully, within a few years, we'll have an SRO at each of the secondary programs. And then they're going to actually train more of them to do the DARE program. So that way, if an SRO is at a middle school, then they are overseeing the elementaries that are feeding into that to do the DARE programs at those schools. So then they're in the elementaries more frequently as well. So I think that's a great opportunity.
Because DARE is just done at 6th grade, is that right? Or is it
Fifth grade.
just
Fifth grade.
5th grade?
Fifth grade.
Okay.
So they'd be splitting time between the elementaries that feed into the middle school? and
So
the middle
currently,
school?
we have one DARE officer that goes to each elementary and presents the DARE
Mhm.
curriculum. And what they are hoping to get to is that all of the middle school DARE officers to be trained. And so that if I'm at Hawthorne, my feeder elementaries would be that DARE officer's responsibility to go and do the DARE training and be in the building. And then those students that they create relationships with are coming to the middle school where they will be housed at. So then there's that relationship, that foundational piece that'll already be established. So then we'll have 4 DARE officers going out and training and then housed in those middle schools.
An additional suggestion has been to add micro-training for our staff members. So I've been here, this is the start of my 5th year, and every critical situation that we have where we send out that messaging or have to go and evacuate students, every situation is different, every scenario. There's no 2 that have been the same. And so really adding some scenarios to our staff members so that they can evaluate how they would react and respond in those situations, and giving them some clear guidance when they have questions. One of the things at our safety roadshows, we've gotten some really great questions that we haven't always had the answer to. And so having that constant dialogue where we can say, what if, or could we, and then bring that back and get some feedback from law enforcement to say, you know, is this a feasible, reasonable thing that we could do? That dialogue is incredibly important, and adding that micro training would give us another opportunity to do that.
And then, we evaluate opportunities to implement advanced software. There's like anything you shop for, there's really some high-tech software where, with our camera system and so forth. So we definitely are gonna keep ahead of that. And I think once you buy it, it's outdated within 2 years. So we just really have to put some thought behind that as well. And then, equipment, when we did the road shows, it was interesting. Every teacher and every school has a little bit of different culture and feeling, and so just talking about all the different things that we can or may offer availability of with, we have shields to be able to look at bulletproof clipboards and things like that. Again, it's not forcing that, but definitely offering opportunities for those that just feel more comfortable if I have certain items and objects.
And then one other thing was just dress code reinforcement. We've had some issues, it's just not the tiny shirts that our stores are only retailing. They don't sell whole shirts anymore. It's more just gang colors and things like that. And so really encouraging our administration to enforce that dress code. That can help alleviate some problems just by taking that action.
And then the final is just, relationships, which has been our huge view forever, I think, in this district, which was really foundational. That, if we build strong relationships with students and parents and so forth, those are the key factors to keeping us safe.
Okay, I'd like to just kind of wrap up this part of the discussion for you and talk maybe just for a few minutes about the varied approaches to the strategies of safety and security. And I would say with that, there are some lethal and maybe non-lethal means to do that. And again, working with our partners that are here today, we can continue to explore a couple of these ideas, things from bear sprays to plastic bullets if you're gonna carry weapons. And I'm not advocating for that, I want you to know that straight up, just straight away. And I think maybe our law enforcement folks may speak to that as well. But certainly when we talk about those lethal approaches, in the news, security officers, staff carrying concealed weapons, there are a lot of questions that come, I think, with both of those things. And again, perhaps our officers that are here today will elaborate on those things for you if you have specific questions. But just some of the ones that kind of came up in my mind and in our discussion last week was as far as weapons on schools with a security officer or with staff, is that just a deterrence Is it a level of comfort? Exactly what are we trying to do with that? If we're looking at a lethal measure, and I don't know the exact statistics on this, but when you're talking about, is it a security company? How well are they trained? To what standard are they trained? What type of weapons do they carry? What type of ammunition? Just a lot of questions in that regard. A marksmanship award on a range might be completely different from an active shooter. In fact, I've heard about 20% is what actually may land on a target when you're in that kind of a situation. You have to worry about, I think, the liability to the district, to board members, to anyone who's caught in kind of friendly fire, someone who accidentally shoots themselves in the foot, shoots another person. I mean, there are just so many questions that come up when you're talking about weapons in classrooms and/or schools. In fact, I remember probably 6, 7 years ago, maybe it was 9 by 10, but just even putting rifles in our schools in a locked, concealed weapon storage area was kind of a big deal. We've come a long way in our society and culture, and so we're in a different place than we were then. Even with our security enhancements, with our video ID and the camera and the doorbell system. Early on in my career as superintendent, I thought, we want our schools to be inviting. We don't want to keep people out, and yet we're in a different place now. And so we know that that's working for us. Other things that you might want to consider is for these gentlemen and all of the officers that serve with them, what about how do you identify a perpetrator from a staff member? Unless you give them some kind of a sash or a banner or a vest and say, oh, don't shoot me, kind of thing. But then you wonder, okay, can that be replicated? Will people know our systems and try to replicate that and come in as a law enforcement or a security officer? So again, a lot of questions when you talk about arming people in schools. I think those are really the questions that I had, maybe in regard to who would you hire then? And a military background is going to be different than a civil background, someone who's trained for civilian matters versus a military operation. So if we were looking to hire retired officers, are there enough to provide our schools with one? Definitely the budget, we would talk about that, but if the board feels that it would be a priority, then we're going to find line items to make that work too. So again, just a number of questions that come with all of this, and so this really starts our discussion and gives us some things to consider as we look about the future, or look toward the future. So with that, maybe if, I don't know how you've all decided to do it, but I'd love for at least one representative from each of our authorities here, Chubbuck County and Pocatello, to just come up and share a few thoughts with you that they have, and then definitely open it up for some questions, because I'm sure you have some. Who wants to go? All right. Sheriff and Chiefs, thanks.
Can I say before you start, can I just tell you guys how much we appreciate what you guys do, really and truly. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure the rest of us do. We really appreciate what you guys do for us.
Thank you.
We do.
I'm Chief Roger Shy, Pocatello Police. A little bit of background. I was a school resource officer at Hawthorne Middle School for a couple of years, back when Doug was a principal over at Alameda. So we've worked together at several different levels, as well as with Tanya through School District 25. So we've watched this evolve, and back when I was a kid, you never would have this discussion about having active shooter in a school or these set of circumstances. And it's unfortunate that we have to have this conversation, but it is the brutal reality of we do have to have these conversations because these things are occurring. when you look at what Tanya was talking about with training, equipment, and leadership, those are all keys to success. And leadership is the most important thing for us on the battlefield, out in the street, or in a classroom. Every problem is a leadership problem that you encounter. So I think it's important that we continue to teach our teachers, our principals, and the students to be leaders in reporting things and looking at things that are out of the ordinary, and to give them that ability to feel comfortable to go to their principal or their teacher to tell them, hey, this isn't right. This is what's wrong. There's something that doesn't look out of the norm. And when she's talking about that, it's like, well, we want to make sure the physical security of our schools are safe. So when you look at the Uvalde, and I know that's when you're talking about the most recent one that happened, there was a door that was propped open, and the teacher did close it, but was it locked? Well, probably not. So we need to make sure that those doors are locked, and we're following through with that. And we, that we get complacent oftentimes. It's like, we get comfortable in what we do, and that we have to always look at, well, things are going good, but what if somebody chose to stop us? Did we have those resources and manpower in place to do that? And so we have to make sure we're following those policies and procedures. They're there for a reason, and not that you get this mindset of, oh, that will never happen here. Well, a lot of things have happened in Pocatello, Idaho, that people said would never happen here. We've had the unfortunate incident with, we go back to 2006 where, people in this room, we investigated the Castillo Stoddard incident where we said, we never thought that would happen here, but their end state, their master plan was to do a school shooting. So, and because of people in this very room stopped that from happening. And so we have to take those matters serious. We need to train, and I really like the aspect of those little micro training sessions. Those are critical. The big training sessions like the unification drill that we did that Sergeant Barchi put together, those are great, but that takes a lot of resources, manpower, money. The things that don't cost a lot of money are those things that Tanya was talking about, those little micro training sessions, and I think those are critical to do that. I'll kind of turn the time over to Tony because I know he needs to leave. He needs to be at football practice. Go Rams.
Go Rams. Big game this week. Highland Pokey game. So I too was a resource officer, kind of my background. Started at the sheriff's office 30 years ago. I was a resource officer at Marsh Valley. And that was back when it was the start of some of these shootings that were happening, and now we've evolved into what we are today. I mean, I couldn't dream back then that we were going to be in this part of my life, thinking about school shootings that are happening consistently. I know for us at the sheriff's office, the fortunate thing that you guys have with you available to you guys is that myself, Chief Giberson, Chief Shy, you could have brought Chief or Captain Zwaggart here, as well as Chief Teton from Fort Hall. We've had such a great relationship with all the agencies here that we could all be sitting here together and talking about the same thing, and we're all in agreement of how we would handle what we're talking about. I know with the captain and my chief deputy back there, we've had a frank talk with our patrol guys when that Uvalde thing occurred, and it was a matter of me saying, if you guys have any other second thoughts other than going in when there's a school shooting going on, find another job. Because I can tell you, for each one of us in our agencies, that's the unified decision, is if something happens, we're going in. There's no waiting, there's no pause. If something's happened, we're going in to stop the threat. And I think all three of us speak to that. That you guys have that assurance that there is no hesitation. And our guys know that, and I know all the troops from these two other agencies are in the same mindset. So it's good to see that you're doing some proactive things in the school. I like what I heard from Tanya, and we have the Marsh Valley School District, and Unfortunately, we only have one SRO that is in charge of 7 schools, so it's problematic, and it is a budgetary thing. We'd like to have more, but it's one of those challenges that we face. It's the reality, it's the money. And sometimes you got to decide what's important to your resources. And I get it. There's a lot of line items in everyone's budget, and you got to prioritize those things. So to kind of combat that, we've started kind of making our patrol guys during the day when we contract with the South County towns down there with Downey, Lava, McCammon, Aramo, and all those towns have elementary schools that don't have that continuous coverage with SROs. So we've kind of challenged our guys to at least walk through the schools during their shifts when they're in those towns, providing contract time. So it's one of those regular being seen in uniform so that it becomes common that whether it's the kids that see him or the community or just people in general, just see that, the visual of the uniform officer walking through those schools, it becomes a reality that, oh man, they've always got a cop there, whether it looks like we have more than one resource officer. So it's things like that we're trying to come up with in lieu of budgetary things. So, but I'm fortunate to be here with these 2 chiefs here that we all think the same. We all were on the streets together. Roger Shai talked about the unfortunate investigation, but we were all part of that. So we just have a lot of deep feelings about our community, and we're fortunate that we do live here, that people do support our law enforcement, and we all feel that way. But of course, I know we approach our work day every day, knowing that we've got to earn that every day with the community trust. But I feel like we have it. So, go ahead, Bill.
I just want to say thank you for inviting us and welcoming us here. I appreciate Doug and his leadership and bringing us here and last week having that meeting. I also agree with everything that's already been said to this point. From the Chubbuck standpoint, we have a DARE officer in the schools in Chubbuck, including Tyhee and Connor Academy. And so we've got the DARE officer there usually in the winter semester, and that's something that we've been doing for at least the last 7 years. We did have a period where we didn't have a DARE officer, but they're in there interacting with the kids and working with the kids, and it's proven to be a great program that our council and our mayor and I strongly support. The one thing that I think, we've talked about a lot of things about how to react or respond to a situation if it occurs. And one thing I just want to add to that is another layer of prevention. We've talked about some of the mental health issues. I heard Tanya talking about that. But I'm a huge fan of physical security. We talked about the doors and limiting access into the schools. And I think if we can prevent a problem from entering the schools, that's a big help to preventing any type of issues. It's a lot easier for us to address something in front of the school than in the school with all the kids. So I think that's something that, as a board, if you're exploring or looking for things that can help in this scenario, to me, physical security is almost right up there at the top, on top of everything else that's already been said too. So, and again, appreciate the time.
So just a couple things that I know Tanya brought this up about the school resource officers, and we have a plan developed. We're actually adding a resource officer through working with Doug. We're adding another school resource officer, and that plan would be to have a SRO in every secondary education. And then as they go and into those secondary or those elementary schools to teach DARE, the other thing, the idea behind that is to build relationships with the kids. And so as the officers build those relationships, they're more proactive in going up and telling that school resource officer or their teacher or their principal about something that's going on. I know as a school resource officer, I had 2 different females with 2 completely different incidents, unrelated, that were planning on hurting themselves in the lunchroom. And because of the relationship I built with those students, they came to me as the resource officer and told me about that, and we were able to get them the mental health that they needed. So those relationships are key. And this plan that actually, Corporal Jordan Johnson came up with it and presented that to Sergeant Daniels, and it's a great plan. And then if we get this grant, we'll have 2 additional resource officers that will fill in for when those officers are gone or they're training. But they would also be able to handle all the juvenile calls that we get in through health and welfare, which we get I know speaking with these guys, we get a crazy amount of those right now. So those are all things that we're looking at. How can we better use our resources and manpower and be more effective and efficient with what we have? And we all train. We train on the same system of active shooter. So we have trained on the alert system. We all have trained with each other. We do multi-agency trainings so that I know that if me and Tony show up at a call together, we're going in. If we have one officer show up, they're going in. They're not going to sit and wait. It's not going to be show up at 11:33 and go in at 12:50. That's not happening. And if that person works for me, he's going to be in the road the same boat as with Sheriff Manu or with Chief Guyberson. They're probably going to be looking for employment elsewhere. We are very firm about if you see something, you're going in. We've seen time after time where tragedies happen across this country in Parkland or in Uvalde, all the way back to 1984 in San Ysidro in San Diego. It was a McDonald's, but it was the same thing, same set of circumstances. Columbine. We have to make sure that when we go in there that we knowingly put our lives in harm's way when we take that oath. And so I can assure the board that if there's a problem like that, we're going in. But the thing that we're constantly looking at, and we're always making adjustments for what we're seeing going on across the country. What new training can we go to? What new equipment can we provide? And what leadership can we give our people? And help others around us be successful. And we always ask ourselves, what does winning look like? What does winning look like for me with a safe school? It's kids coming and going to school and getting a good education, building relationships, and coming out as successful young men and women. That's what we're looking at. And we may have to lock the doors. That may irritate some parents. Well, I'd rather irritate some parents than and make that tough call. Make us the bad guy. I'm okay with that. So yeah, the cops told us to lock the doors. So I guess we'll take some questions.
Who was it that presented the plan to Officer Daniels, or the request for the grant?
Corporal, well, the request for the grant came from myself and Sergeant Barchi, but the plan to reallocate the manpower was Corporal Jordan Johnson, who's our DARE officer right now. And the cool thing about him is that the relationship aspect. He walked into the middle school at Hawthorne, and the principal was talking and was like crickets. He walked in and it was like a rock star walked in. And that's a cool thing right there. That's what we want, that relationship with our students, is to look at those officers like that. And he got that from teaching DARE, and that's kind of where this idea came from. And it came from him. It came from the boots on the ground and that decentralized command component. And he worked that up the chain of command, and that's what we're going to implement.
That's great. Love that.
So I just want to get your thoughts on how you guys feel, or what you think about having teachers armed, or what you think that would, because it would cause a whole bunch of other issues.
Yeah, I did want to comment on that too.
You know, we live in Idaho, and traditionally Idahoans are comfortable around firearms. And what I have found is people are a little more confident than they probably should be with firearms. One of the things that we talked about in our meeting last week, for me, even if we have somebody who's very competent, very accurate, you know, maybe they have a background for it, we still have the retention issue. That, you know, where is this firearm at? Who has it? If we respond to a situation, do we know if that's a teacher or a staff member, or is that the person committing this act? You know, Chief Shai mentioned about an accidental shooting that they had on campus a few years ago with somebody that was carrying a firearm. So there is some upside, but I think there's a lot of downside that comes with it too.
We faced this issue about a couple weeks ago. Marsh Valley School District was kind of approached us about that same issue, arming their teachers, and we gave our input on that, on how we felt as a sheriff's office, and we brought up the same point of view as Bill had brought up. The other thing is, if you arm a teacher that's gone into this system as an educator, and you provide a firearm for that teacher, when it comes to that point, whether it's a student or someone, let's just say a student, that's this active shooter, is he really there? Is he or she gonna be able to shoot a student that he spent all this time with during the school year or knows them intimately? It's hard enough for trained cops to shoot an individual, but you put a teacher, an educator in that position, and to make that critical decision when they're taught to embrace children and teach children, odds are it's not going to happen. And that's just one of many factors that we brought to the attention of the school board up in Marsh Valley, along with some of the same issues that retention's a big deal. There's a firearm there, but are they trained to retain that thing when, I don't know, a big football player kid comes in and, is confronting any teacher that may be undersized or something and takes that firearm from that person. So, there's a lot of issues that you have. I'm not saying either way, but that's kind of the concerns that we have as a law enforcement agency.
I think another concern that you, and you didn't bring it up, but I'm sure you thought about it, is if a teacher does say that they're in that situation and they do shoot that person, then they've got to live with that. And a lot of people would really have a hard time with that.
Yeah. One thing I did mention in the meeting with Mr. Howell is, my mom is a retired school district teacher from School District 25. And so I saw the level of responsibility that she had throughout her career, and to add a firearm to that. Teachers carry a lot of weight. They're responsible for a lot of things throughout the day, and to add that to it is an extreme amount of responsibility
Right.
that I think is asking a lot of one individual. So.
One of our fundamentals of our firearm safety is our fourth rule is that we're responsible for every round, every bullet that leaves our firearm, including what's beyond. So under stress, certain things happen to your body, and when you start to pull the trigger on a firearm, and you got to think about if you're shooting at a target, and you miss, where is it going to hit? And if you have a teacher who doesn't frequently train or doesn't frequently train under stress, and they start shooting a firearm, and let's say they have a magazine that's filled with 17 bullets. Well, where are those 17 bullets going to go? And think about the kids running away down a hallway. Those are all potential, victims that could be hit from that too. So that's another thing that comes into play is that, and I know Doug talked about this, what level of training does this teacher have? And when you're talking about the retention issues, that's like, what holster are they carrying? And you might have a nice $500, $600 handgun, but you have a $15 holster, and then it gets ripped off your belt. And then we're trained that every incident we go to, there's at least one firearm present, and that's the one on my hip. So I have to take that into consideration. We work that into how I stand, the distance I keep from people, where I place my hands, all within just a consensual contact. So that's all things that a teacher's not thinking, but I'm thinking that because of my training and experience. And so it's a heavy burden to place on teachers, and what's the right answer? What may be the right answer for a different school district where there's, no police officers in the middle of Idaho or the middle of Montana? Maybe that's the right answer, but is it the right answer for School District 25 or Marsh Valley School District? Probably not.
I had a question, and the details are very vague right now, but with what happened in Rexburg, I mean, that's as close to home as with one of these. Rigby, see, even that detail. It was an R and I knew it was Idaho. The things that they have now done, I mean, are we looking at what other school districts are doing and kind of patterning what they're doing as well in that respect? And I mean, I don't know enough about the details.
Can you
but-
be as more specific?
Well,
as to
I'm
what
just
they're
wondering,
doing?
what have they done now to change just because of that situation? Because they've had, I mean, are we implementing similar things to that? I don't know, maybe I don't even have a question, but
I'm not familiar with what the
With-
school district.
what they did or how they handled
So
it.
when I was at the threat assessment conference, the chief from Rigby, actually the officer that was in charge, actually got up and talked. They have armed individuals in the building,
Mhm.
and none of them used, their weapons. It was actually a teacher that hugged the student. The things that they learned was the teachers panicked and the students were running from the middle school to the high school, and that's what became some victims that thankfully nobody, was permanent. But truly relationships, identifying, communication, all the things that we already do, we just have to stay very diligent in doing them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So there was no magic, we're doing this now. And truthfully, after that, they had another person bring a weapon beginning of the next school year. And it got reported and it got taken, and it was more of a suicide attempt. But all the things that they put in place in the sense of, communication, relationships, played a part in making sure that it didn't happen again.
Right. Another question I had is, since I've been on the board, not even a full year, quite yet. Weapons, knives seem to be a pretty predominant thing that we deal with. And I don't know, and I hate to even think that we need to get to this point, but metal detectors, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot that we're missing, because it sure seems like most of the weapons that are because someone has said something, or I saw it, or how much of that could be averted.
And I got to admit, about 90% of those are, I
They're
forgot,
accident
from
or,
I'm
yeah, it's my
camping, I'm
toy.
hunting, especially hunting
Right,
season.
right.
And people that work in the construction, I mean, all kinds of things. But, one of the things that we talked about having a security or a metal detector is if it goes off, who's there? And we have so many entrances.
Yeah.
Who's there? We'd have to man each one of those. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely.
So there's a
I
lot
guess-
of layers.
Right.
And we feel pretty fortunate that, we have been really good. We've been
Well, and I
really
think
good
what
at
I've seen,
having
they
presence.
have them, but we haven't
presence at the
had
bus stops, presence.
injuries from them. I mean,
Never
it's not
injury.
been, it's
Mm-mm.
just because they've been found on their person.
Mhm.
Final question I had is, so the ID idea, is the secretary just recording who it is? What happens when they flash that ID at the
So as soon
camera?
as you come to the security system and show us your ID, why are you here? What student are you, wanting to communicate with and so forth? We identify that person with Infinite Campus to that student. So if
Okay.
there's no identification, then we don't let them in
Okay,
unless we have a phone call from parents that Aunt Susie's coming to get so-and-so.
okay, that's what I just wasn't sure. We're just
Mhm.
flashing it at the camera.
Again, we
and then-
talked tons about layers,
So,
that security system, and we do get relaxed. Oh, I've seen you so many times, no, why are you here? What's your, what's your purpose? And then outside doors, as diligent as possible. Convenient, I'd rather you be inconvenient. We have fobs, we have keys. Don't jar them open. Do not leave them open, and then, again, your classroom layer.
So we talked about metal detectors actually quite a bit, and there's a dichotomy to everything, right? There's a balancing act that you play. It's like at what point do you have to have all the kids come in? I mean, how long of a process? They're going to get to school 30 minutes early now, so that's a huge issue, right? So there's a balancing act to everything that you guys have to juggle with, that we do, and on an administrative level. So as you guys kind of digest this stuff, start talking about that balancing act, and those are things that we're doing too. So
I think it'd be their wish that we'd let nobody in the school building, and that that's a balancing act. I have kids, I want to be able to go in when
Yes,
but
yeah.
we need to have a purpose too. And so that's one of the things that we communicate to our parents. It's not that we don't want you in or being part of it. It's the purpose and being safe.
And part of that's a culture shift too, especially, up here with open campus, right? Kids, at the high school level, kids go and eat lunch, right? And then they come back, right? For me, it's like, from a safety
foreign
standpoint,
concept.
yeah, for me,
Close
from a
campus.
safety
Let's do that.
standpoint, that just.
Close it up.
Yeah, lock it down, right?
It's a disaster, right.
But then, but once again, it's a balancing act. So you gotta weigh those things out and look at that and go, all right. And we have to make adjustments too. And I would say, let's not make too big of a decisions. I would rather make some small decisions, evaluate those decisions, and then make adjustments to see how those decisions played out. And at the end of it, people will look back and go, oh man, they made this huge decision. And when in reality, we didn't. We made a bunch of small decisions and evaluated those.
I would just make one suggestion. If there is anybody armed, whether it's through a company, whether it's through retired police officer or a teacher that wants to do that and go through training, not a teacher that doesn't want to. I mean, that would not be an issue. But somebody who does, we have a lot of technology, and so I just want to kind of speak to a couple of the problems that you mentioned. If there was a problem at a school, I would think that the dispatcher would text a picture of that person to every single officer's cell phone. This is who we have armed at that school. But also, I would think that the pictures should be up at the police department somewhere that you're looking at them on a daily basis, you know who they are, and you have a personal relationship with them at the school. So the worry of we don't know who they are and who's shooting, I think that part could be solved. But I do understand there are other issues. The training is just not there to the extent that, in the coordination, but there would have to be coordination too, personal cell phone, contact with that person, personally, because they would have to be on the phone with the police department the entire time, stuff like that, with technology.
So under stress, I'm not looking at your face. I'm looking at what's in your hands. And even though I might have seen you 100 times and seen your picture 100 times, under stress, all the blood is leaving my extremities and it's going to things that keep my body moving. And I get tunnel vision, and I get what's called auditory exclusion, meaning I don't hear things and I don't see peripherals. And if I'm going to an incident like an active shooter, and this call is 100% happened, my heart rate's up, my blood pressure's up, and I'm not seeing what a lot of times that you're that armed person at the school. And the thing is, here at School District 25, how many teachers do we have here?
We have about 1,250 staff. Yeah.
I've got 100 officers. And Chubbuck's got, 23?
One I would say one per school. I would not say,
But
100.
that's going to be, that would be very difficult to, and I'm not, under those set of circumstances, I'm not going to take the time out to go, where's that text message at? I'm grabbing my rifle, I'm grabbing my rifle plates, and we're going.
I understand that, and I don't know that that's the answer.
Sure.
I just want to add technology into the equation. And so if there is a school that really does not have the resources, like you're saying, they're smaller towns, they don't have the resources. I mean, I know it's not ideal.
And that may be the right answer for that school district. And I think that what we're focusing on here is what's right for school district.
Just
25.
adding maybe more people within the department.
Chief, once that phone call would be made to you, how much time would lapse before you're in the building?
A couple minutes maybe.
On average, that's the data I was received as well. Within 2 minutes to 3 minutes, you would have multiple law enforcement in the
I
building.
think at Pocatello,
If that.
Absolutely.
You're getting.
I want
Chubbuck,
the police
you're getting
department.
County, you're getting Idaho State Police. You're gonna have every agency responding, much like if there was an incident out at Chubbuck Elementary. You're gonna have everybody going there. Everybody's gonna go there, so.
That's why we really
And I'm not
stress the
advocating
urgency.
for that, I'm just,
Yeah.
you know, want to look at everything.
Sure.
You know,
The
because,
interesting thing about what you bring up is, just even us as law enforcement agency, I can see a Pocatello officer off duty and not even know who he is,
mhm.
you know?
I can
They're
understand
working
that.
with the agency for 10 years, and I see him out in the civilian world out of uniform.
Mhm.
Sometimes, there's so many new guys that sometimes I don't even know who they are until.
I would
Identify.
prefer, yeah, I would rather add, with this grant, I love that, and I would rather add to the department.
But that would even go with an off-duty officer that was in the school at the time. He would know to go, get on the ground, because he knows we're coming in, and the person with the gun's a threat, you know, so.
Okay, so on that note, how do you guys feel about having retired officers in the schools?
Who are,
You know, I brought that up, just if you were gonna have armed people in school, that's probably your better hiring pool. But again, are you gonna put them in uniform so they're identifiable? You know, they're gonna know some things that maybe somebody just with a private security background isn't gonna know. And they may or may not have relationships with the local agencies if there's somebody from out of the area. But I feel like if you're gonna do that, if we're gonna explore putting private security, that's probably your better, you know, vetted type of people that would do it.
Chief Shy, with
I
that
agree.
being said, do you think there's a pool out there for retirement? I know that you're having difficulty filling your staff. Would,
I mentioned in the meeting that that's a pool you could draw from potentially, but I don't know how many of them are gonna be willing to do it. I mean, it's a tough ask. Yeah.
The other thing that you need to look at too is that from a liability standpoint now, what level of training is the school district going to provide that retired officer? What equipment are you going to issue to them? And then everything's a perishable skill. Your shooting skill is a perishable skill. Your tactics are a perishable skill. That's why we constantly do refresher training, and Post has actually made it mandatory for us to do certain training to keep our certification. So it's like going to the range and qualifying once a year, that's not training. So then what level of training and added cost for things like equipment, ammunition, what policies are you gonna put in place for that, are all things that the board would have to look at and balance out. And then what kind of background investigation are you gonna do on that person? Did they come from an agency that's well-trained, like one of ours, or did they come from an agency where they weren't well-trained? Why did they get out of law enforcement? Were they forced out of law enforcement, right? Where, you know, those are all questions that you would ask as you would do your background investigation. And well, I do agree with Chief Giberson that is going to be probably your best pool, because they understand all the constitutional things that come along with the issues of being in a school, search and seizure, things like that. So, but it's kind of a, you know, interesting topic to about, because it's worked in some communities, but it just depends on the community, right? I mean, it just depends on how you look at that. I think it's could be a dangerous road to go down, because it's that level of training, and then it's always good if nothing bad ever happens. It's if something bad does happen, then that's when you look at it.
So can you clarify something? So is an SRO an employee of the school?
No.
Or is it's someone from the police department, and we subsidize a portion, the full salary? Because I know that was kind of coming up in some city council meetings, how?
Oh, you paid attention to those, huh? Yeah, those are great discussions. So.
I don't even know how that all ended up falling out, because I know the budget got approved, so.
Yeah, it got approved. Yes, it did. So what that is we have an MOU with School District 25.
Okay.
School District 25 provides a certain amount of funding towards school resource officers. And they are employees of the Pocatello Police Department. They are trained by us. They follow our policies, our procedures, our equipment standards. So they're fully functioning police officers. So in the summertime, they're either reassigned to patrol they go to the summer school over at New Horizons, or they go to other programs like our summer program or some other component where we partner with School District 25 on. But they're
So is
subsidized
this something
funding.
that someone would apply for, or is that an assignment that you would give to an officer and that could be moved around, or, I mean, I'm just,
Sure, that's a great question. So what we do is, like right now, there'll be an opening, like let's say Highland High School is the opening. So we would advertise within the department who's interested to going to Highland High School. Here's the minimum requirements. So we have minimum requirements for them to go. And then we do interviews, and we actually have someone from the administration at Highland High School sit on that interview panel. So if we have 3 different officers that interview, that principal has say on who will be the best fit for Highland High School.
I know that Jim and Andrea both talked about the retired police officer idea. I think we do have more resources than a lot of districts, but if we did do that, would it be possible to have a partnership with the Pocatello Police Department where they would participate in the trainings and they would still be a part? But this job that they have, they are doing on a volunteer basis, but in coordination with the department? Is there a possibility of kind of having it under the umbrella of?
So what you would,
If we don't have enough funding for every elementary, and there
Uh-huh.
were a couple of people that were retired that would be willing to do that, would they be able to be included in training through the Pocatello Police Department? Is that something that's possible? I understand liability, all those things would be a huge issue for the department to have to assume where they're not actually an active member.
so that would be more like a reserve status that you'd be asking for if they would,
If there would be people, I kind of think there would be. If there are some elementaries that don't have any protection
so.
on a regular basis.
So like by protection, what's,
An officer there.
so so I guess my question would be, and this would be, we talked about this in our meeting, what it would be the board's end state? Like what are your end goal would be? Are you looking for to have an armed person in every elementary school?
That is what my goal would be. I can't speak for everybody
We've
else.
never talked about it.
Because we haven't never talked among ourselves about that, just because I don't like soft targets when you've got a group of kids, a
Sure.
large group of kids, and to have that many children and to have no protection for that many children in one place. I would love to just explore any possibility to be able to have someone who is armed protecting all of those large groups of children, if at all possible.
Well, then that would require, like, if the schools that are in Chubbuck, for them to be under reserve status for Chief Guyberson, or out in the county with Tyhee yeah.
And it's not that many, really. I mean, it's, how many elementaries? 23, and we have a couple of elementary, though. 13, so, but they're shared. I mean, all the secondary have someone, excuse me, full-time. So we're really talking about just the 13 that are not covered on a full-time basis. So we're not,
This is a question I've never had posed to me before, but just thinking here without really looking deep into it, we're all under the post umbrella, and kind of like you guys are with the State Board of Education, we have to meet certain requirements. And I don't believe there would be any way that we could train a pseudo-private security force to deploy on a voluntary basis at the school district unless they became full-time reserve police officers.
Yeah, I wouldn't, it wouldn't be an untrained person coming in for you to
Yeah.
train. It would have to be a retired person that has already been trained, is what I was kind of wondering about.
Yeah.
Right.
Post-certification requires us to maintain 40 hours of training every 2 years, and 4 hours needs to be in firearms, 4 in defensive, or 8 in defensive tactics, driving, law updates. So they've gotten a little more specific as to what we need to be trained in. And then we would have to bring them under our umbrella, and then they would have to break free from the school to train. So those are all things that, you know, I think the board
For
would need.
cross-covering.
Yeah,
I mean, there's
and
be a lot of issues.
there's a lot of moving parts, but I think the
Well,
first.
summers.
Sure.
They have all summer to train. They have every break.
Sure.
There's lots of days off for, you know, school.
I think the first thing that the board, before we even have that discussion, is that the board gets together and is aligned to say, hey, look, this is our mission alignment is there. And then that way, if you have that ask from us, then we could go and we could do a little bit of research on this.
How could we make it possible?
Yeah. So I think that would
Because
be.
I'm not saying it's possible right now, but could we, yeah, we do need to talk and see what our consensus is, but personally, that's what I would like to see. Because if there is someone who wants to target a large group of people, that's just an easy target. It's a soft target. Everybody knows that the elementaries don't have the SROs. I mean, if they're aware at all. Because if you go to middle school, if you go to high school, you see them there. But everybody knows that the elementaries don't. And so they might see that as an easier target with that many kids.
Sheriff Manu brought up a great point earlier, where we do a lot of the same things, and I know in Chubbuck they do a lot of these things too, where during the day, during downtime, we encourage our officers to park in front of an elementary school and walk through them. So a couple
That's
things,
so
so
good.
so that they get to see, the
love
kids
that.
get to see them. There's a car parked out in front of there, and people don't know when we're gonna randomly show up to an elementary school, right? So that's kind of the mindset behind that. So we, even though they're not assigned to those elementary schools, we're often at those elementary schools.
Patrolling that.
Patrolling them,
That's-
running radar in front of
That's so
them.
good. I love that.
So we're kind of doing that a little bit without having, I think that could get, what you're talking about could get a little bit messy. So.
And I still go back to the physical security. If we can do things to increase the, you know, you talk about soft targets, if we can harden the target by using the structures that are in place in the buildings and keeping the problems out, that's probably your greatest preventative measure.
I would love to hear more about
Like
that.
Tanya said, I mean, you look at any study, those shooters are taking the path of least resistance. So when they approach a locked door, they move on. Locked doors, they move on because they want that easy access, and they don't want to spend the time to try to gain access in a locked door, you know, because it's too much trouble and time is of the essence in their mind. And
And-
once they keep, you know, they access the door that's locked, they're going to find the next open. If they're all locked, I mean, I agree with Bill that you provide that, just that measure, it's going to stop a lot of resistance, so.
I thank you. I really appreciate that. And I just really appreciate what you're doing. I think that is just such a good idea. I've seen officers at elementaries, and I didn't know that was your, you know, what you do. And I just really, really appreciate that. So thank you.
Can you touch on the issue really fast of military versus civilian? I know we have a lot of military or trained teachers, and I've had some of them say, well, I am in the military, you know, I would feel comfortable having a weapon in my classroom. Can you maybe address that?
I'll speak to that, being the veteran in the group. I spent 4 years in the Navy. It was a really enjoyable time of my life. I packed parachutes on ejection seats. And I worked on a flight deck on an aircraft carrier. So to say somebody's been in the military, they have a certain set of skills, but they don't have necessarily the set of skills we're looking for. There's a lot of jobs in the military that are all very critical. Mine was very critical, but it didn't really springboard me into law enforcement. And so that's a concern I have. And I respect our veterans, and being one of them, I appreciate everything that they did. Some of them are air traffic controllers. Some of them are hydraulic mechanics. You know, they do have some experience to a certain point, but I don't know that they're the best option.
Just
What
because,
what if they were a combat vet?
Could potentially, I mean, they obviously have more than somebody that was packing parachutes, for sure. But everybody's experience is a little bit different. And so, again, anytime you talk about bringing an employee in, even with us, if we, you know, when we get applications from people that want to come to work for the police department, a veteran's getting the same vetting that anybody else is getting.
yes,
We're still looking at all the things that we look at, the psychologicals, the written tests, the polygraphs, things like that. We're doing all those things regardless if they're a veteran or not. So we still vet them.
yes, definitely, I appreciate that.
Okay, this is a good start for a board discussion that we can follow up with, but I think you have the perspective of these gentlemen who deal with this kind of thing each and every day, every minute of their lives. So we appreciate all of them being here today and contributing to this conversation, but I think we'll continue. I would like to get further direction from you as what you've heard today and what you're thinking, and digesting a little bit more of this information and processing it, and then I think we'll just kind of pick it up next month if that would be okay. All right.
Doug, just one thing. If you guys are interested in coming to something like a training session that we do, and you want to see how we train, feel free just to give any one of us a call. Well, I'm speaking for myself, but I'm sure these guys would.
I do.
Yeah. You know, come out and see how we train and go out with the officers and if that would ease your level of comfort on what we do and pull the thread on the why. And, or if you have any questions from us, feel free to give us a call.
I would really love for everything to come through your departments, anything that we do in the school, because I love what you're doing, and I trust what you're doing, so I appreciate that.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, we
Thank
appreciate
you.
you guys again. We really want you to know how much we appreciate what you do.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda we have is the Gift and Talented 3-year plan, which will be presented by Kathy Loris.
Good afternoon. I just wanted to take you through the Gifted and Talented 3-year plan. You have it in your packet.
Can't
I'll
find
let
it.
you
so-
try to come to sleep. Give us just a moment to
Okay.
log back in.
Got it.
So I will just start by talking you through Idaho code. And it's, when you get there, I'm on page 3. So districts are required per code to submit a plan that articulates how we will meet the needs of students identified as gifted and talented K-12. And that plan is submitted every 3 years by October 15th. In code, it talks about, excuse me, what we need to have included in that plan. And part of that plan is a programmatic evaluation every 3 years. And so on page 3, it articulates who was part of the evaluation of the past plan, as well as, excuse me, providing recommendations, excuse me, thank you, for the next 3 years. Are we good then? Okay. Page 4 just articulates that I'm the person assigned as the curriculum coordinator to also coordinate the gifted and talented plan. On page 5, excuse me, the State Department of Education has listed best practices for gifted and talented programs. And so those program considerations are just articulated as part of this template, and I have recorded in the right-hand side where those are included in our plan. One of the things I do want to highlight is notice funding at the top. The State Department currently does not provide funding for, thank you so much, for our gifted and talented program. So we do have some general funds set aside to support our gifted and talented program. We have 2 facilitators who teach the gifted and talented pull-out program for 3rd through 5th, as well as a para-educator. use general funds to pay for students to be transported from their elementary to Washington Elementary 2 days a week, and the gifted and talented programs are located in Washington Elementary at that time. And we also use some general funds for supplies for those classrooms. On page 6, our philosophy statement is that the Gifted and Talented program extends the district's mission of learning today for the possibilities of tomorrow by providing services to identified gifted and talented children which correspond to their unique social, emotional, and cognitive needs. And then that definition for giftedness is articulated in the law. That just comes directly from Idaho Code. On page 7, it starts our program goals, and I just want to highlight a few of these for you. One of the goals that we have been working on the last year and moving forward are to provide screening and identification practices that create a proportional representation of demographic groups that closely mirror the district's population. So, for example, our kids from a specific socioeconomic group or race and ethnicity, we want it to mirror the districts and the district's population. And one of the things that we've done in the past, we used a screener that teachers would look through this screener and identify learners to be tested. Through our research, we found a new screener that's called the NNAT, and it is a non-linguistic screener. And so instead of assessing what a student knows, it assesses how students learn, and it's kind of considered the gold standard for unbiased scoring because it's non-linguistic. So it is unbiased for students' primary language, their socioeconomic status, their educational history, and even students with vision impairment, because there's only actually 2 colors in the assessment. And so we administered that this spring, and in the past, we screen at the end of 2nd grade to test at the beginning of 3rd grade. So teachers would refer, and they can refer at any time during the year, at any 3rd through 5th at any of those grade levels. But just this, in the past, it was about 60 kids for 2nd and 3rd grade that were referred. And this kid, we picked up this, with this screener, we picked up 80 learners that will be assessed. So we're really thinking that's been successful. And teachers have commented that it's catching kids they wouldn't have regularly referred for screening, so thank you, yeah. Another thing that we have changed is our curriculum for grades 3 through 6 are really STEM focused, so they focus on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, inclusive of the arts. We have, in the past, our 2 gate facilitators taught a 6th grade class during one try at the middle schools. We've added now an additional, now 6th grade will be taught by a teacher in 6th grade as one of their flex, but it's a double flex, so they do get an hour a day. Depending on the school and staffing, it might be for 1 try up to 3 tries, so that's been an exciting change. And then our last goal is to provide professional development, not only to support our teachers, but also our parents, to provide support. And one of the things our parents have really asked for is support on the transition from elementary to middle school. And so we're including that, and that will happen in the spring of 5th grade. The program options are articulated on page 8. I talked about we have limited resources. And so for K2, students who are identified as possibly being gifted, they can receive consultation services so teachers can meet with the gifted and talented teachers and be provided with ideas for differentiation and enrichment in the classroom. For grades 3 through 5, like I said, we screen 2nd graders in the spring, and then we do testing in the fall of 3rd grade, and then that is a pull-out program where students attend 1 day per week. They go to their regular elementary school. They board a bus, attend Washington until about 1 o'clock, and then go back to their regular school. So they eat lunch at Washington on that day. And again, that's a STEM curriculum. For 6 through 8, 6th grade is a double flex in the middle schools. And then there's also a gifted and talented class that is part of the day during 7th and 8th grade. And it really, the curriculum really depends on teacher expertise at that level. And then for 9 through 12, that's articulated on page 9. Our high school learners are served through honors, dual enrollment, advanced placement classes, as well as a variety of electives and leadership opportunities. Page 9 starts the identification procedures. Idaho code requires that we use multiple measures, so those are articulated there. We have added an appeals process. We have very specific guidelines for those who qualify, but if we have a learner who comes within just a few points of qualifying, then the appeals process can take effect, and the teacher, a parent, or even a learner can just provide evidence, additional evidence that we then have a committee that meets, we review that evidence, and students can qualify based on this appeals process if they're really close to qualifying. And then again, like I said, every 3 years, there's a program evaluation that includes staff from the district, administrators and teachers that provide us with feedback on the program. We also use student and parent surveys, and then revise our plan every 3 years. And this plan will be submitted to the state before October 15th. Okay? Thank
Any
you.
questions?
Thank you.
Thank you for what you do, we appreciate that. Okay, next on the agenda is proposed continuous improvement plan presented by Amy Bowie.
Okay, so you'll want to open that and I'll skim through it. I know it's been a little bit heavy, the conversation's been a little bit heavy, so I'll try to skim through most of this. So each year, we have to submit a continuous improvement plan to the state. And this year, the first part of the plan is a narrative, and this year the state didn't require that we resubmit or update the plan, which actually works out pretty well. I mean, we had to change Chuck or to Amy Bowie. We had to make that change. But other than that, I think it's a good time to, throughout this year with some changes in legislation on literacy and specifically in regards to dyslexia. This is a good time where I'm new in my position, AJ's new in his elementary director position, Raina's new in her position as well. And so this will give us some time to really comb through this and look at it critically and strategically, and we're waiting on the state to give us some feedback and some information, not feedback, information on how we're going to, what the requirements are going to be to train all of our teachers K through 12 in terms of this new dyslexia legislation. So I want you to be aware that a lot of this will change this year and it will definitely be updated for next year. So it's probably good that we didn't put a lot of work into updating it this year, and I think most districts probably didn't. So you can read through this, but I want the narrative. I do want to just draw you to the heart of the narrative. Can I do that? It's on page 5. So, I really feel like this is the heart of what we do, and I don't know what it says about me that I have a favorite part of the narrative of the CIP, but I do. So the comprehensive literacy plan alignment, and this is how we comply with the state. But when you really start looking at it, the collaborative leadership, multi-level support is given by the district to provide strategic guidance, support resources, encourage partnerships, and share knowledge. At the district level, our school board superintendent and administrative staff place a high emphasis on the development of literacy as demonstrated through time and resources dedicated to the literacy effects included in the plan. Collaborative leadership in support of literacy is evident throughout the plan in the following ways. And I was thinking about this, and this is a list of bullets, right? And they don't seem necessarily exciting, especially after a 2-hour meeting, right? But what I want you to see is that this really represents teachers and leaders working on behalf of learners and their development. So take the first bullet. Teacher leaders serve as unit developers to create and revise units of instruction and to support implementation of the units. Like, I wish you could just see teachers grapple with standards and strategies and learning progressions when they make these decisions, and they talk about learners who are gifted and talented and learners who are struggling, and how do we challenge them at their own levels, and there's so much energy and work in that one bullet, and so this sort of epitomizes what we do as a team. The district literacy and new teacher coaches work. We had 77 new teachers this year, and to watch those coaches use their expertise and their experience to kind of ignite enthusiasm, support, motivation in those new teachers, that was pretty cool. The building leadership teams in each and every building, administrators lead those building leadership teams to collectively identify students in need of interventions and plan interventions and monitor student progress. And I've been, as a building principal, I've been in those meetings. They're called RTI meetings, response to intervention. And I've watched teachers bring names and talk about students with passion and bring data and say, I don't know, I've tried this and I've tried this and I've tried this, and watch them problem solve. So you can read through all of these, but as you're reading them, I want you to understand the power behind each and every bullet, that these are real people working on behalf of real kids, and it's a pretty powerful and magical thing. Okay, so, and then after you get through this is probably, because some of you are new to this, right? Is this your first time approving a continuous? Yeah, so let me just tell you this. Once you read through, I'll highlight some things for you, and then next week, I'm new to this too, so next week we'll ask you to approve the plan so that we can submit it by the October 1st deadline. That's how that'll work. Okay, so then the next part of the plan is the metrics and demographics, and it's right after the narrative. So the narrative ends on page 7, and then it goes into the metrics and demographics. So here's what I did, just to make it a little easier for you to see. Anything in red won't actually be in the plan. That's just so you could see our rationale and how we went about choosing goals. So if you see, there's 21, 22 performance targets. Those are goals that were set last year, okay, by the team. And then there's no place for results on this form that goes to the state. This is a state template. So you would not know the results if you were just to look at this template. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So I put the results in red for you. And then the 22, 23, what the template does ask us to do is to set our target for next year. Okay, so if you look at the let's use the four-year cohort graduation rate as an example. So our target for the 2021 cohort was 91%. The first red number is what our district graduation rate was, which is 90.7. And then the second number is what the state graduation rate was, 80.1. So you can see that comparison. And then the final number in black is what we set for our target again next year. So our target again next year is 91%. And we had dialogue. We met as a team, some of Superintendent Howell, and both the elementary and secondary directors, and Kathy and I, and we set these goals. And then I have to point out a mistake of mine. 5-year cohort graduation rate, I reversed those numbers, which will make you feel better. The 92.1% is ours, and the 84.1% is the state's. So that's a big mistake. But the rest of them are right. So then if you look down to the ISAT, so it says all students will be prepared to transition from middle school to junior high to high school. So it has ISAT Math and ISAT ELA. Now this gets a little bit convoluted, so let me just show you what you're looking at. So if you look at the percent of students who score proficient on the grade 8 math ISAT, we set a goal for 49% in 21-22. The actual result was 40% for our district, and the state result was 36. So we set the goal at 44%. Okay? And then this is where it gets confusing. Every other line, the next one says percent of students who make adequate growth. Those are important words. Score proficient and adequate growth, those are two different things. And if you look at the adequate growth, let me explain to you what that is. Each and every student has a target of how much they should grow and their anticipated growth. So that's the percent of students who actually hit their own individual target. Now here's just to make this even more complicated, the state hasn't released that data to us yet. So we just said, okay, we don't know yet really, but we put the result of 44% last year, and they kind of stopped doing that during COVID. I think that caused part of the problem as well. But we said 44%, and our goal for 22-23 is 48%. But this is definitely something we will look at, and if you're interested when we get the data, even though we've already approved the plan, like we can say, oh yeah, we got that adequate growth data back, and here's where we were. Like we can definitely inform you of that when that happens. But most likely, bless Kathy's heart, she's been emailing someone from the state like every other day, I feel like. And they said that'll probably come in mid-October. Okay, so we're really gonna focus on just the proficient ones. So if you look at the proficient students the percent of students who score proficient on the 8th grade ELA ISAT, our goal last year was 60%. Our result was 62%, the state result was 54%, and we set it at 64%. Okay, so you can glance through these numbers and make sense of them now. But I want you to know how the discussion went. If you go to the next section, it's a yellow chart, and that's the same thing. That's the IRI, same concept. If you look at the percent of students who scored proficient on the kindergarten spring IRI, it was 75% was our goal. We hit 73, the state hit 65, and we reset that goal at 75. Again, the last one on is an adequate growth on ISAT, so that's why there are no red numbers there, because we don't have that. The next section, section 3, how to progress towards literacy goals and targets. I need to explain this too. The percent of 3rd grade students proficient on ELA ISAT, that was our goal last year. They told us this year that we could not use that as a goal because that's a required assessment. So the second line is the goal we changed it to for this year. I wanted to include the results of our goal from last year. That's why I left it there. So our results last year was 56% on the 3rd grade ELA ISAT. But if you look at the percent, this is what we changed our goal to, and Kathy and I really actually enjoyed looking at this data. Percent of 3rd grade students who scored below proficient on the fall IRI, who gained at least one performance category on the spring IRI, and the result, we looked at that, if we were to look at that, if that would have been our goal last year, 52% of our learners who were below proficient on the fall grew at least one performance level, and some of them grew 2 or 3, and that was pretty cool to look at, and we set our goal at 54%. What would be really interesting for you to read through is, and I'm not going to read it all to you, it's just the report of progress narrative. And these are just, it highlights some of our successes. For example, the district's 5-year 2020 cohort graduation rate was 92%, which is not only above the state, we're pretty consistently above the state average in almost every area, but it wasn't only above the state average, but it was also above the state's goal. They had like this projected goal that we were above, which we were pretty proud of that. New Horizon, they increased their 4-year graduation rate from 63% in 2020 to 80.8 in 2021. We were expecting a dip on the ISAT scores in math with our new math program, an implementation dip, and we didn't see that. That was a highlight for us. The district's percent of students meeting the college and career benchmark on the SAT remained consistent despite, disruptions during COVID. Like, we didn't see a ton of growth on that, but just that we remained consistent on that achievement. We were pretty proud of that. And then the next section goes through challenges. One of our main challenges is the new math curriculum. A lot of the assessments are written if you know about visible learning, there's a surface level, a deep level, and a transfer level. A lot of those assessments are written at the transfer level, and so after 1 year, teachers are working really hard to push kids towards the rigor of the program. And so a lot of the work in PLCs and our professional development is aimed at helping those math teachers and those students meet the rigor of the program, but that's also really exciting work, and to watch them collaborate to problem solve and to meet those demands has been pretty exciting, I think. So you can read through some of those challenges. And then finally, moving forward, you can see that we're going to keep working on K-8 math. We're really going to work on that differentiation piece. So there are 3 stages in the K-8 math. The third one is differentiation. And what I mean by that, by differentiation, is that's the part of the lesson where the advanced kids are being challenged, and then the kids who are, everybody's being challenged at their own level, which is not an easy thing from a teacher's. In fact, I think personally, in my 18 years in the classroom, I got a lot better at differentiation, and you're like 15 through 18. Like that's a challenge to meet kids at their own level. And so that's something that we're going to do moving forward, and you can read through the rest of those. The final part of the plan is this, I'm going to be really candid about the final part of the plan. The final part of the plan is the staff performance, okay? And this comes from the legislature. The legislature wants us to group teachers into grade level bands and subject areas based on the assessment tool that they used on their evaluation through the state. So I'm going to show you one just so that I can this will make sense. If you flip to the 6th through 8th grade ELA, it's a couple of pages, like I guess 3 pages in. Do you see 6th through 8th ELA? Mm-hmm. So this is just an example so you see how to even read this. So there were 2 bands of 6th through 8th ELA. The first group of 6th through 8th grade ELA teachers used a pre and post test for their student growth goal. The rest of them used a writing rubric for their student growth goal. And so this represent 90%, the performance target was 90%, the result was 86%. So what that means is 86% of students taught by staff in this grade, in this subject area, who used this assessment tool, that's how many of them met their target, 86%. Here's the problem. I'm just going to tell you what the problem is with this. I don't know if I should say.
The tools aren't consistent?
Yeah, I don't know if we should say we don't care, because we don't. Like I care about data, I care about learning, I care about progress. I don't care about this. This is what I care about. As a building administrator, these goals are set at an individual teacher level. They have an individual professional learning goal, and then they have a student growth goal. And everybody gets to, it's the way it's designed in the state. Every teacher gets to set their own student growth goal with their administrator, right? And then they choose something, which is brilliant because they choose something that's meaningful. They know where their students need to achieve. So what really matters in all of this data is not this. What matters is that one-on-one interaction with the administrator and watching their own so trying to report it collectively is not very meaningful. It's really meaningful when you're looking administrator to single teacher and working throughout the year multiple times on how's your growth goal going and how your and the teacher comes in and said they're struggling on this and here's how I'm intervening, and that's the meaning behind that part of. But this is the legislature asked for this, so that's why it's there.
Why do you think, what is their?
That's a really, really great question.
To identify certain teachers?
I think they just feel, I think maybe I can't speak for the legislature. I think maybe they think that this is giving them some feedback without realizing the more important feedback is at the individual level. I think they're like, oh, look, 86.
It's just hard to, how can you do that at the individual level at the state? But
yeah.
So collectively versus individually, even the way the statement is written caused us a great deal of
angst
concern last year because we didn't even really understand what they were asking for. Yeah. And so we had 2 or 3 calls with the assessment and accountability folks at the state board level. And quite frankly, the guidance they gave us wasn't as good as I don't know that they understood for
It-
sure.
And
what
they also
were
feel like they're in a
asking.
position for, and I've called, and I could pull the new card, like, hey, can you explain this to me? And they just said, you know, we're working with them, we're working with the legislature that this maybe isn't the best way to report this, and in the meantime, we're gonna do the best we can, and that's what this
So
is.
is this the state board that's doing this?
Yes.
Because if you look at their backgrounds, there aren't any educators on the board. I'm just saying.
So they're doing the best they can to give us guidance
I mean,
on how to
there's a lot
meet.
more to do with farming than there is
Yeah.
education on that board. But,
This-
but I'm just,
This is to meet state statute. That's what this is for. So I would, in a nice way, I wouldn't spend a whole lot of time on that if I were you. That's it. That's all I have for you.
Thank you.
I am so sorry, I have to go. But, thank you.
We appreciate what you do. Okay, next on the agenda is the planned update provided by Carl Smart, insurance plan update provided by Carl Smart. Also the pay manual revision by Carl Smart.
Welcome.
Oh, okay. Excuse me. We just want to share a little bit of what we've experienced over the last 2 or 3 months with insurance.
Are you sure that's all it is, Carl? 2 or 3 months?
It seems a lifetime, but 2 or 3 months really what it had been. Ultimately, we had 1,203 employees on our medical plan when we decided to move to the state plan. Over the course of the July, August, excuse me, employees could sign up for the plan they wanted, the different plans that they had. And ultimately, we ended up with 1,143. So that means we had 79 current employees with insurance waive. We had 63 new employees waive, and we had 133 who weren't insured, remained uninsured. So overall, we had about 275 employees who waived. And so when you take 1,203 less than 1,143, we have, of course, new employees who came on and filled that gap. And that's important because if we'd had less than 1,100 employees enrolled on the plan, we would have been charged a higher rate. However, we still have the lower rate, but we have to pay for about 63 ghost employees. So that adds up to quite a bit of change, and about $750,000, $750,000 for the, I call them ghost employees. They like to call them at the state level sweep employees. And so, but we have gone through our first month and paid it, and everybody that had applications that were correct got their medical cards. I think it was last Friday, wasn't it? They started showing up at everybody's mailbox. And so, but we do have 1,200 or 1,143. The good news here is we had 206 employees who added dependent coverage. And that's what we talked about, being able to add dependents. So 206 were able to add dependent insurance. 48 uninsured employees got insurance. So that is what we really wanted to see with this change. And overall, it was a good, by indication of this, it was a good choice, so.
Have you gotten any feedback as far as ease of use? I mean, is there much of a difference as far as accessing the care or the doctors, or, I mean, any other feedback that way?
We have not had any, I have not, maybe Shauna has.
I
gotta
can
give
tell you,
Shauna,
from working at Dr. Summers, the orthodontist, people are excited. Now their kids are getting braces because they have orthodontic coverage.
a little bit
so-
orthodontic coverage.
Yeah.
Like Doug came in this afternoon and says, how much is our dental benefit?
Yeah.
Because he's interested in that one for one reason or another.
That's true.
And so there was a little bit of an increase in the dental benefit. But I haven't heard, and I gotta give kudos to Shauna Miller. She put her heart and soul in this for the last 2.5, 3 months, and put a lot of work into it. And so, we got through 1,100 plus applications, and, we had a number of applications that rejected because people couldn't put their birth date in right. Instead of being 1900 and something, it was 2000 and something, so their birth date was actually in the future a lot of places. Wrong addresses, just odds and ends. And so we were able to, over the last couple of weeks, we were able to fix a lot of that. So of the 2 dozen or so that kind of had some screwy applications, they might be a couple weeks behind getting their cards. But overall, we are on our way.
That's great.
We owe about $30,000 for the month of September, then we start fresh for the month of October, and it'll go much smoother from there on.
Cool.
Enough said. We're late.
Thank you.
We can move on. Next Tuesday night, we have a request of you to approve our pay manual for the coming year. And you had a copy of that, and we've had more changes in this one this year just because of the circumstances we've been in with the change in the plan. Normally, our changes in the pay manual is fairly minimal. So if you're interested in pursuing any of these changes that are outlined here, we can certainly talk about them. But those are the reasons why those particular portions of this pay manual were changed. We delayed this about a month because there was a policy, was it 6105 or something like that?
The 75,
75, yeah, the one.
Yeah, 7507.
So we had that on first reading last month. We'll bring that to you for second reading, and hopefully the changes were minimal, so we can adopt that and adopt the pay manual at the same time. The one item in here that is going to cause a little work on some of our parts is bringing back that personal leave earning from 7 months on the job to 3 months. We're going to go back and we'll take all those people who have dates out in the future 7 months, bring them back and recalculate all those numbers. So that'll probably be the one that'll cause us a little bit of work on this, but everything else is pretty well taken care of with everything we've done. So unless you have questions about some particular items in here, I will leave it to your own reading leisure to go through there.
Little blue book from last year? Is that the book? Sorry.
Are you thinking the negotiated agreement?
The
Yeah.
negotiated
Oh, no,
agreement
this
is
is
completely
different.
separate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we have the manual right here.
No, I'm looking at it.
The manual resides out on the website, and so it's available for anybody to peruse. Interestingly enough, we had a group come down from Bonneville School District several years ago, and she saw what we'd put together as our pay manual. She lobbed onto that, and I imagine she's got a pretty good duplicate of our pay manual up in Bonneville County, and maybe even over to, where's she at now, Nampa? Caldwell, so. Anyway, I don't care if she wants to do a little plagiarism, that's okay with me. So anyway, we will be asking you to approve this pay manual next Tuesday at our board meeting.
Okay.
And like I said, if there's questions, I mean, we could certainly discuss them tonight, but I think most of them are fairly straightforward. And
And then there would be an opportunity next week too, if you have questions
Right.
after you've read through it again. Yep.
Super. Thank you, Carl. Appreciate what you do. I don't know how you keep up with it.
oh, it's easy.
All righty. Dr. Howell, do you have anything else?
No, I think that's it.
Okay, so that concludes this meeting. I declare this meeting adjourned.
All right.
Hit the gavel.
So we have disciplinary tomorrow, though?
At 4, right?
Yep.
We're gonna start with the property discussion at 4, and then we'll have the student here at 4:30.
I was never able to log on.
You never were able to log on.
I couldn't find the agenda, but
Okay.